Valued rather than this presentation, which I urge all of you to see, delivered an epic TED Talk. And she characterized our collective experience as going from being citizens to suspects. I think it's the best characterization I've heard. The demonization of our faith and the institutional targeting of Muslims compelled many of us to become change makers that day. Many of the lawyers you know in our community today decided to become lawyers because of that day. Between 9/11 and now, I also collaborated with a number of South Asian, Asian Pacific American, and Muslim advocacy organizations. I've also done interfaith and intercultural work with many organizations. I've also participated in workshops for Sikh and Muslim communities on anti-bullying, internal bias, and collective action. I'm also part of an intercultural organization that sends me to New York City high schools to share my story and take questions from New York City high schoolers. I've also worked to train young leaders in the community and expand interfaith and interfaith outreach. I've learned a lot by engaging with folks in the community and outside of the community. I've trained with folks that are actually paid full-time to do this work. There's a huge difference between those folks and those of us who are doing this part-time. I'm a litigator, a lawyer that, I've been a lawyer for over a decade, and that's my day job. It's in the evenings and in the weekends and whatever free time we have that we try to compel change for our community. I share this with you so you understand the context of what I'm about to say about where I think our community needs to go and how we need to get there. The outrage over this year's election cycle shows how quickly we as a nation forget our history. This country's been having an identity crisis for centuries. It's trying to figure out who gets to define America, Americans, the American dream, the American agenda, and America's future. Trump appeals to folks who've long believed that we need to become more exclusive about who we let in and who our laws protect. He's willing to throw big groups of people under the bus, including undocumented folks. He maintains that even citizenship doesn't guarantee you everything promised. That still depends on things like ethnicity, faith, economic status. He's about walls, divisions, and blame. To most of us, it all seems ignorant, short-sighted, and contrary to the spirit of this country. He's Trump, someone who built his entire brand on the concept of exclusivity, representative of the modern-day American voice. The difficult truth is our community is facing that same struggle. Who is representative of us, and what are we even trying to represent about ourselves? We have to really embrace our full history and story. The history of Muslims in this country dates back to slavery in the 17th century. This country was literally built on the backs of Black Muslims. Arab Muslims came after, largely in the Midwest. If you've read Dr. Beam's book, Shias in America, you actually have quite an excellent narrative about our history as a Shia community, going from slavery to post-9/11 America, touching on the development of Muslim and Shia organizations, faith-based campus organizations, and the influence of foreign powers and international relations in our development as a community. We also have to acknowledge that race has played an important part in our community. There was a recent Newsweek article by Zehra titled Beyond the Pale, another good read, talking about Muslim political mobilization, race, and political advantage. The article noted that Arab Americans generally, enjoy the right to citizenship before even Chinese Americans. Why? Because they were accepted as white. That's very interesting in terms of racial dynamics for our community, because South Asians have been here for a long time too, but we have had a very different racial experience. We gained citizenship rights later, and most of us came to the country post-1965 when immigration laws in this country were relaxed. South Asians fall into something called the model minority myth. It's a characterization that means we are touted as examples of what all minorities can accomplish if only they would really work hard and try. We love falling for this myth. We think it makes us heroes, but it's actually a means of holding other racial minorities down. Adopting and believing this narrative really gives us a distorted sense of self relative to other minorities. If you look around this room, you would really think our community is really represented and made up of South Asians and Arabs. A recent poll by the ISP organization actually shows American Muslims have no majority race. If you look up there, the biggest chunks are actually Asian and the Black community. Are we living up to that representation today? Not in most of the rooms we're in. What all of this really means is that we really have to think about when we're speaking of our community, who we're including and who we're leaving out. And we also have to be really aware that this community is shaped not by just us, but American foreign policies, immigration laws, and racial dynamics. So what's the takeaway there? It means that each of our stories is part of the Muslim American experience, but none of it is the definitive Muslim American experience because there's no such thing. Our story and our identity is very complex. Our Shia centers are largely ethnically based around language and ethnicity that tends to isolate us and fragment our power, our ability to meaningfully influence politics, public perceptions, and media narratives. We live in real bubbles, making our centers cultural preserves, and that's what they're doing, right? They're really preserving a lot of our culture. But what we need to make them are places where we choose to build bridges between different parts of our own world. And it's our choice as to whether we want to make that change or not, but one of the things I want everyone to take away from this presentation is that our choices have consequences, and we need to be mindful of them. In coming up with what our story is, we have to realize messaging is a lot about decision making. And we have to start thinking, what's the story we want told about us? Narratives are generally grounded in facts, lived experiences, or popular narratives. Trump's narrative is built on a very popular narrative in this country. It's fear. It's not based on fact or anything else. It's fear, because this country has a history of falling for that narrative. Our country also has a narrative about America being the land of the free, home of the brave, and liberating folks worldwide. Unfortunately, because our domestic and foreign policy choices have at times conflicted with that narrative, a lot of the world is laughing at us right now, because that narrative is ringing hollow. So what's the lesson for us? In coming up with our messaging, we have to consider not only our ideals, but our realities. We've got to face up to some difficult truths and decide if we're going to do anything about it. We have to be really critical of ourselves in coming up with our story. I like to often think of a reporter coming into our spaces, our centers, our conferences, and comparing what they would perceive versus what we think we want, what we think we represent. I want to share some examples about that. If we all decide that part of our story is that the Muslim American community is a racially and ethnically diverse but cohesive community, like I said, look around. That's not evident today. The numbers are all there, but our community is so fragmented. Can we really call ourselves a community? We're really not leveraging our full power. We have to question, are we comfortable with this being the status quo for us? Say a reporter asks to meet with your center's board, leadership. I'd say 90% of the centers most of us attend, it's going to be South Asian or Arab men. You can say whatever you want to about what you stand for as a community. What will people see when they look a little deeper? These realities communicate choices about who we are, who's in, who's out, our power structure. Another example, and this is a controversial one, hijab is a very popular topic across media outlets nowadays. We like talking about how there's no compulsion in Islam, that our women are not oppressed or pressured to do anything. Walk into our centers, walk into our spaces, what's the sign you see? It is always a sign, generally, of a woman, and it says, please observe hijab. If you're a reporter and you walk into our centers and spaces, you would think hijab is a concept exclusively directed at women. We are creating that misunderstanding, no one else. So coming up with our story is very complicated, right? There's a lot of complexity in this. Let's talk about our numbers. The max number of Muslims by most neutral sources suggests that maximum we have 3 million people in the country that are Muslim. That makes up a total of 1% of the American population of 300 million plus. Shias make up generally about 10 to 15%, which is under 500,000. Even if you think I'm grossly lowballing that number, double, even if it's 1 million. The point, there are far too few of us, so more of us, by which I mean all of us, have to really step up and do more. We have to step up across ages, races, ethnicities, cultures, and sects. To step up together. Numbers matter and our diversity is our strength. And that we can't put up a picture of what a Muslim man or woman looks like is actually a strength. The transformational moment in Malcolm X's life is touched, witnessing the diversity and unity of the Ummah during pilgrimage. To excerpt from the autobiography of Malcolm X, when he was asked what impressed him most about Hajj, he said, "The brotherhood. The people of all races, colors from all over the world coming together as one. It has proved to me the power of the one God." Today's Muslim community sadly doesn't really reflect this ideal. We're highly fragmented. In fact, during this weekend, UMAA, ICNA, and ISIN are all having conferences. These are good things. We're starting to organize, but we're still not building enough bridges in between. Apologizing, condemning, and anti-radicalization programming has not worked to lessen Islamophobia. It's still rising. I think our time and energy would be much better spent shifting the focus to building our community to be more inclusive, broadening our definition of community, and investing in our collective strength and influence. We have to build from within and grow from within. Building community encompasses a lot of what we heard the last speaker talk about. Interfaith and interfaith outreach. Consider this, just about every time you see a Sikh American on television responding to a news story about a hate crime or a bias incident, the first thing they say is never, "We're not Muslim." That's not what they say. They always say, "Hate against anyone is wrong. My faith teaches me that that's terrible, and I happen to be Sikh and I'm not Muslim." That's not just happening on its own. That means Sikh American community organizers did the work. They went into their communities and say, "You do not throw people under the bus to get ahead." When's the last time we invited Sikh folks to our interfaith efforts? Do we reach out to our local Sikh community and say, "Hey, I know there's been a lot of backlash against you guys because you're mistaken for us. We just want you to know we're here. Please let us know if there are issues. All of our kids are getting bullied. Maybe 2 parents can go for both of our communities the next time something happens." The problem is, since 9/11, each of our communities is still trying to grow it alone. We're missing the opportunity to leverage the strength of combined communities. Our communities aren't the first to experience institutionalized hate in this country. Look at the history of Native Americans, Jewish Americans, Japanese Americans, Black Americans, many of them are Muslims. We talk about them as if they're in another community. They're not, that's our community. We don't need to recreate the wheel on how to combat hate, rather we need to add our voices, dollars, and numbers to existing movements for changing long-standing policies and targeting, that are targeting and stigmatizing minorities. We're all shocked that Trump disrespects different segments of our population, throwing groups of people under the bus. What he's doing is really appealing to the self-interest of his supporters. So let's do a gut check of whether we're doing the same thing. Let's take the example right now of policies that our government is pursuing. They're referred to as countering violent extremism initiatives, CVE. Sorry, the Sikh community has suffered quite a lot of some slides I want to show you. Many of the policies are coming top down from the White House. These are policies that are very important to follow because basically they're attempts to recruit the Muslim American community to root out terrorism amongst us, pretty much making us an extension of law enforcement whether we want to be or not, and worse, linking us with problematic extremism and making us responsible for solving it. Many community advocates believe this is the most serious danger our community faces today. What is our community's response? First of all, most of you don't even know about this program, I'm pretty sure. The other initiative is a website launched by the FBI called Don't Forget Epic. This website is meant to train educators, teachers, and students on how to spot potential radicals in our midst. The Shia community has an organized response to any of this. We're still sorting ourselves out. The truth is our community is split. Many of us say, what we should say to law enforcement is, hey, we have nothing to hide, come into our centers. We'll sign up for any initiatives, and we're using any opportunity we get to tell the authorities, don't worry, it's not us, it's the Sunnis. They're the problem. Us, we're cool. Don't worry about us. Come on in, compromise our civil liberties, sign my kids up for a lifetime of government policies that associate them with terrorism. And yeah, I'm good with all of us being characterized as second-class citizens, just to show you that we're not the bad guys. As a nation, we're not known for picking up on nuances, so it's an interesting strategy if we decide to do that going forward. Again, that's a choice. This community can decide to throw others under the bus, but you have to think of the long-term consequences. Going back to the population stats, let me give you an example of how this might play out. 1% of the population, right? That's what we are. 63% of us are first generation, we're immigrants. If the Black American population woke up tomorrow and they said, we're not the problem, those foreign-born Muslims are the problem, let's throw them under the bus. Are you cool with that? Is that who we are? We really have to think about how we want to identify ourselves. I want to be clear. I'm Shia and I'm loud and proud about it. I've written an article called Why I'm Shia, right? But this isn't about our identity in terms of let's gloss over our differences. This is about strategy going forward to do what's in our best interest and getting smarter about it. We need to really create large coalitions to challenge these initiatives because they're linking us to extremism. What we need to do is recognize they fall into a larger pattern of government policies that are profiling minorities. Stop and frisk, Japanese internment, right? There are all these policies and we try to distance from them, but it's not all part of the same. Why not throw our support behind communities that have faced this, show solidarity, and learn from them and build upon their efforts? I also want to say we're heavily invested in the idea of personal spiritual development, but we tend to judge really hard amongst ourselves. She doesn't wear hijab. He's really secular. Have you ever even seen that family at the center? The problem with all this is I'm not sure when we decided that our centers are a place for people that have their practice perfect. And I'd like to see even one of us that would proudly get up here and say, my practice is beyond reproach. Our centers, our conferences should be safe spaces for people to come in, get guidance, figure out where they're going without feeling pressured, without feeling alienated. I've met so many really thoughtful, educated people that are alienated by our own community and that are looking for support, that want to identify, that want to learn more, but they feel the centers are cliquey and they're not welcomed. In this country, change requires local civic engagement, grassroots mobilization, and broad coalitions. In New York, Eid was passed as a public holiday because of the work of faith-based organizations, cultural organizations, and labor unions. You wouldn't think that. The world is really based on a lot of coalitions across different groups that you may not think have anything in common. It's groups that are reaching out to support each other, even though nothing may seem obviously in common. Change requires coalitions and solidarity. Last summer, I organized the Young Leaders Institute on behalf of a group called South Asian Americans Meeting Together. The mostly college-age participants were tasked with coming up with year-long projects addressing and confronting anti-Black racism within the South Asian community and the country as a whole. It's an exercise in solidarity, activism, and coalition building. There were Muslim kids part of that initiative as well. That's really hard. We didn't talk anything about being Muslim, we just did the work that needs to be done because we believe that's part of our faith. What's another encouraging motto? What can we do? Each center and community organization really needs to assign, I think, a board member to being dedicated to doing interfaith, intercultural, interracial outreach. We all need to do the work, but I think it's time we actually committed someone exclusively to doing that work. This community building also requires we take the first step and often reach out first And it won't always work the first time. You have to keep trying to show you're actually sincere. You have to invite folks to iftars, you have to attend their events, and be clear that we're not there to convert anyone, and that we're not just recruiting them to help us fight Islamophobia. Your work cannot be about your political advantage, because that's very transparent when you come into those spaces trying to do that. It also can't be one-off iftars where you're like, hey, look at me, I did outreach today, I went to an interfaith iftar, and we're done. You've got to do more relationship building than that. The kinds of changes I'm talking about today aren't going to happen without getting the support of our community leaders. Community leaders build our centers and really our histories. I think we need to show them that we're the next generation and are ready to build our futures. And we need support. They set the pace of change, so it's really important to pitch them rather than push them. I learned that from years of Zehra. You really have to sell the community on what you're trying to do. If you cannot sell them, your approach is wrong. It's not that the community is lagging behind. We need to do a better job of getting us all on the same page. None of this is happening in isolation, and we need to really force ourselves to do better. We need to also stop equating invitations and influence. Getting invited to an event is nothing more than a photo op unless you're using that opportunity to speak difficult truths, stand up for us, create relationships to bring back influence into the community. I want us to be in every single room, iftar, discussion, and protest. Decisions are being made about us, without us, and real change takes people with the courage to sit in rooms where they feel uncomfortable, speak truth to people internally and externally, and not just in public social forums. I'm going to wrap up. I know I'm out of time. There are a few things I want to say, but basically, I think we need to be more strategic in how we're planning out things. We have to factor in time, people. What's our project 6 months from now? We can't just do a protest here, a petition here. What is the larger program we're part of? I'm also happy to see we're seeing lawsuits that are being used. We're a small community, and that can be a real advantage if we use it correctly. I'm really happy to see that most of us understand that hate mongering is not going to go away by itself. During this weekend, we also talked about political action committees. I know KPAC is here and they're trying to recruit support. We're also trying to hold politicians in office accountable, and Ali Mirza is here who's also trying to run for office. Only a quarter of us are actually going to vote according to historical trends, and that's really unfortunate. I have more slides that I'm going to skip over, and the final point I'm going to say is that we all need to become a community of community builders. People that bring more of us together, expand the idea of community internally, build out relationships externally, and call out our own biases. We often wonder how the Alabama would want us to act today with today's complex realities. I believe they were actually quite clear on their own legacy. After Imam Ali alayhi salam was attacked in Kufa, and knew that he would pass, he said the following to his sons: I advise you and all my children, my relatives, and whoever so receives this message, to be conscious of Allah, to remove your differences and to strengthen your ties. I heard your grandfather, peace be upon him, say reconciliation of your differences is more worthy than all prayers and all fasting. We will all keep praying, and we are about to enter a month of fasting, but I urge you all to also commit to community building. Building a better, stronger, and savvier community worthy of our Imam's legacy. Thank you.